Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to resilience, business continuity, adversity, anything that can help you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Today, we're going to have a really interesting conversation. We are interviewing today best-selling author, international lecturer, and someone you may remember from being on quite a few talk shows after 9/11, but I will let him explain that. I'd like to welcome to the show today, Michael Hingson. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. And before we go too far, congratulations on your new book.
Thank you. Yeah, Live Like a Guide Dog came out on August 20th, and we're really excited. So I'm hoping people will go buy it because it teaches you about dealing with emergencies, dealing with fear, teaching you that you can use fear as a powerful tool rather than letting it blind or overwhelm you. And I use the examples that I've learned from 8 guide dogs and my wife's service dog to illustrate points in the book. So Live Like a Guide Dog is really an appropriate title.
Yeah, I do have the book. I'm reading it. And as I mentioned before we got started, I'm halfway through. And I know we're going to jump into the book a little bit more a little later. So I won't ask you any questions on it now. Now, I know who you are. We've met before and we've had a couple of conversations. But just in case people listening around the globe might not know who you are, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. So you mentioned I'm a international public speaker. I own my own business. I'm a New York Times #1 best-selling author, and I get to go on podcasts and programs like this. I worked in the World Trade Center on September 11th and escaped with my 5th guide dog, Roselle. I grew up in mostly in Southern California. I've been blind my entire life, and people always figure that, well, you're blind, you can't see or do anything like we can. You're not as good as we are, is what it really comes down to. And the reality is that's not true because every single person on the planet has a disability. And as I point out to people, most of you have the disability that you're light dependent. You don't think so? Just wait until the power goes out in a room and you're struggling and trying to find a smartphone or a flashlight so that you can see again. I've seen that happen so many times. Disability does not mean a lack of ability. Disability is a characteristic that we all have that manifests itself in different ways. But just because some of us are not light dependent, we are light independent, it doesn't mean that we are less than you. It only means if we learn, we can do the same things, but we may use different technologies and different tools to do that same things that you do.
Yeah, and if you read your books, as I'm doing right now, you will learn that there's almost nothing that stops Michael. Nothing. There are stories that will make you laugh that oh my God, I can't believe that. But it's great, and I'm really happy to have you here, Michael. I've been kind of excited about talking about this. So apologies if sometimes I come across a little bit too over enthusiastic here, but this is really exciting for me. And I'm
Not
really
a problem. I'm excited to be here. You mentioned, and we've talked about Live Like a Guide Dog, and we'll talk more about it. I'm also excited this year that I was inducted as an alumni member into the Honor Society Phi Beta Kappa. So I am now a Phi Beta Kappa member. I wasn't in college because the chapter at our campus formed as I was graduating, so I didn't get to join. And they discovered that, well, almost 50 years later, and they fixed that. So now I'm a member of Phi Beta Kappa, and I'm excited about that.
wonderful. Congratulations. Now, so let's get started here. Many will know you from the September 11th, 2001 World Trade Center disaster. And you kind of hinted at it already. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So the part that people need to understand is that I made a choice when we opened the office, and I was hired to open an office in New York City for a company. And when we opened the office in the World Trade Center, I made a choice to learn all I could about the building, about the complex. And I did that by literally walking around the World Trade Center, oftentimes not with my guide dog, but with a white cane, because dogs go around things. I wanted to find out where everything was. On the first floor between the towers was a shopping mall, and I wanted to learn what was there and all that. And I also wanted to learn all about the emergency evacuation procedures, learn how to get to my building from everywhere I could. And I needed to know all of that in part because my motivation at the time, when I'm walking with my guide dog, I don't want the dog to get into the habit of going one way to get somewhere. It's not the dog's
Mhm.
job to know where to go and how to get there. The dog's job is to make sure that we walk safe. It is my job to know where to go and how to get there. Whether people like to believe it or not, that is what any blind person who is capable of travel at all can do. And any blind person who learns how to be capable of traveling around learns to do that. So it was my job to learn where to go, how to get there, how to get around, learn every possible nuance that I could. And I used all those things to make sure that I didn't let the dog get into the habit of going one way to get somewhere. But I also realized much, much later that that was helping to develop a mindset in me that says, you know what to do in an emergency. And when the events of September 11th happened, the mindset kicked in. So the building was struck 18 floors above us on the other side of the building. And of course, everybody would say to me, "Did you know what happened?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, of course not, because you're blind. You couldn't see it." Excuse me, blindness had nothing to do with it. The reality is the airplane struck the building between floors 93 and 99, so I just say 96, on the north side of the tower. I was on the 78th floor on the south side. The last time I checked, Superman and X-ray vision didn't really and don't really exist. So the bottom line is I didn't know because I didn't see it. Nobody saw it. As we were going down the stairs with hundreds of other people, none of them knew what happened because they were all in the building on the same side as I was. We figured out an airplane must have hit the building because we did begin smelling the fumes from burning jet fuel. And so we figured an airplane hit the building, but we knew nothing about what went on. We didn't know it was deliberate or any of that. No one did. So get the idea that, well, the blind guy didn't know because he couldn't see it out of your heads before we organize a power failure in your room sometime when you don't have a smartphone nearby and you're really stuck. The bottom line is that blindness had nothing to do with it. And the unemployment rate among employable blind people is still in the 50+% range. And that's not because blind people can't work either. It's because sighted people think we can't, because they think that eyesight is the only game in town. It's not. Um, and I say that very emphatically because I need people to understand that we're as normal as you, except we may do things differently than you. But a lot of things women do different than men. Tall people do different things differently sometimes than short people, and left-handed people do different things than right-handed people. They have to use different tools sometimes. The bottom line is we're all different. We all have gifts. Disability isn't an inability or a lack of ability. Disability is a characteristic we all have, and it manifests itself differently for different people. Now, I wasn't articulating all that in the time of the World Trade Center, although kind of intellectually I knew some of it. But when the plane hit the building, clearly, because the building tipped a fair amount as I'm tipping my hand toward the camera, and then it came back, there was no question about leaving, even though we didn't know what went on. A colleague who was in my office that day did see fire and smoke outside our windows. He saw it above us because the airplane blew a hole through the whole building. And so clearly something happened, and we weren't going to stay around to wait to find out. We had guests in our office, and my colleague David Frank got them to our nearest stairwell and started them down. And I told him, don't let them take the elevators, take stairs, because he was seeing fire. And I knew that the elevator shafts were in the middle of the building. And if he was seeing fire, there was a good possibility it could or was already in the elevators. And it was, although we didn't know that. And so I didn't want him putting our guests in danger. Anyway, then he came back and we went down the stairs and we did escape. But all the way down, we had no idea what really happened. In fact, I didn't know what really occurred until after both towers fell. And when I was finally able to reach my wife, and I did call her once just before we left, but the media hadn't even gotten the story yet. But after both towers fell, then I was able to reach her. And she's the first one who told me that two aircraft had been crashed into the towers, a third into the Pentagon. they were all hijacked, and a fourth hijacked aircraft was still missing over Pennsylvania.
Uh, Meeting someone that went through that, it must have been a challenge. And for yourself, how did you go through that with your dog? I think you meant it's the next chapter in the book, which is where I know
Well,
I'll be
it's
starting.
not it's not
Rochelle,
more,
how did that?
Roselle. It's
Was
not
that?
more of a it's not, more of a challenge in terms of what seeing, yeah. Getting out, not really. There was no question about leaving, and we went to the stairwell and we started down. Several of us, including me, worked to keep panic from ensuing on the stairs, and we had to do that a few times, but people focused. I kept encouraging Roselle, telling her she was doing a good job and what a good girl, keep going, what a good dog. And a lot of people followed me down the stairs, and they told me later from all across the country, you were calm and you were telling your dog what a good job she was doing, and you were keeping her focused. We just followed you down the stairs. You know, there wasn't panic on the stairs because several of us understood that if we allowed that to happen, none of us would have made it out. So we kept people from losing it, if you will.
Well, how did you stay calm under that?
Well, like I said, I knew what to do in an emergency, right? We
Mm,
didn't know what the emergency was. Um, but the bottom line is that I had developed a mindset that says you don't have to be afraid if you've got to evacuate at some point or you've got to do something, do it. Um, and I had learned to control fear. That doesn't mean I wasn't afraid. That meant I learned to control it and I used it and focused it to help me focus as opposed to letting it overwhelm or, as I put it, blind me. All too often, we fear so many things. We worry about so many things in our lives, and most of them are things over which we have absolutely no control. It
mm.
doesn't really make any sense to worry about the things that you can't control. Focus on the things you can and let the rest alone. And don't fuss about them. Don't worry about them because all it does is makes you more fearful.
Yeah,
And
which
so,
can cause even more issues after that.
right. So uh, that's been my mindset for a long time. And certainly I had it on September 11th. And the mindset clicked in and I was able to do the things I needed to do. Yeah, the building could have collapsed at any moment. And then where would we be? Well, we wouldn't be talking today. But the bottom line is that um, I focused and did what I needed to do. And part of my job had to be encouraging Roselle, keeping her focused, letting her know that I wasn't going to worry because she had to sense what was going on around us in terms of fear. But she heard me encouraging her and telling her she was doing a good job. And so she focused and did a good job as well. The team worked, and a guide dog and their handler are a team. Make no mistake about it. The dog's job, as I said, is not to know where to go or how to get there. The dog's job is to keep us walking safe. My job is to know where to go and how to get there. And so I very much value the whole concept of teamwork. And so I worked to keep the team focused, which was my number one job that day. And then it worked out well.
Yes. And so what have you been doing since? Because obviously that was what, 23 years ago now?
Well, the day after the day after the World Trade Center incident, I called Guide Dogs for the Blind because some of the people from there had visited us in the World Trade Center. So I called them, and among others, I talked to Joanne Ritter, who was their public information officer at the time, and she wanted to write a story, and I wasn't thinking, so I said sure, and she said, I'll bet you'll be on TV. What show do you want to be on? So I just flippantly said Larry King Live. On the 14th of September of 2001, I had the first of 5 interviews on Larry King Live. Um, the media, needless to say, got the story. People started calling and saying, would you come and we want to hire you to tell us what we should learn about the World Trade Center and other such things. And it wasn't long before my wife, Karen, and I decided that selling life and philosophy was a whole lot more satisfying and rewarding than selling computer-based hardware systems and managing a computer hardware sales team. So I started speaking. I also became the National Public Affairs Director for Guide Dogs for the Blind, being their public spokesperson. And it gave us the opportunity to move back to California, which Karen always wanted to do anyway. She's a native of California. Um, she wouldn't let me call myself a native, although we moved out to California when I was only 5. But anyway, we moved back, and so I've been a public speaker ever since. Um, I've started my own company, the Michael Hingson Group Inc. I've helped bring some assistive technology products to market and help in refining others. But mostly I've been a public speaker. And now I also do a podcast called Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. In 2020, I discovered a company called Accessibe, Accessibe. Accessibe is a company that makes products that help make the internet more inclusive for a variety of different kinds of persons with disabilities. And they asked me when I joined what I was doing at the time, and I told them I was learning about podcasting. And the founder said, "Funny thing, we really would like somebody to do a podcast for us." And I said, "Sure. What do you want?" And he said, "I don't really care. I just want a podcast." Well, I started Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. And we've been doing it ever since. And tomorrow we will actually publish episode 283 or 273. Well, tomorrow is going to be before this airs, but we're up in the high 200s of podcasts being published and on the air now.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun.
I think on that note, we've come to the end of our first segment today. We are talking with Michael Hingson, and we will be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.